How does PwC take your company to the leading edge? They bring the sharpest minds in tech to your team, so you can bring the ideas that will transform your business. They're passionate about your industry, so you can walk into any room with every advantage. And they're with you every step of the way, so you can know you're headed in the right direction. PwC builds for what's next, so you can get there now. Get started at pwc.com/us/leading edge.
Every sip of Coca-Cola brings you closer to the excitement of the FIFA World Cup 26. Because nothing compares to the joy. So grab a Coke and drink in the FIFA World Cup 26. No purchase necessary. 13 plus in 50 U.S. states and D.C. with a web-enabled device. Ends March 1st with 8 entry periods. Rules at cokeurl.com/soccer rules.
At the Musial with Alan and Daniel, we'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. Everyone come gather round, listen to your favorite sound. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We'll talk the games and all the rest, about the team that we love best. We'll talk about the Cardinals all night long. We're gonna talk about the Cardinals all night long.
Good evening. Welcome into another edition of Meet Me at Musial. I'm your host, Daniel Shopta at C70. Alan Medlock's still getting ready for the baseball season. I think their first scrimmage is tomorrow. But this week, joining our illustrious line of guests is Brian Walton. You know him from the Cardinal Nation. Brian, how are you tonight?
I'm doing fine. And, I think you can probably stomach having me on about once a year. And so we're due again.
I should have you on more often. There is no doubt. But I also figure that you are way too busy to come on some little podunk show because you've got a lot going on during the season.
Well, of course, we all do. But, you've had a long history in the community. In fact, I'm sure we may talk about this at some point in time, but you were involved in the predecessor message board community to the one that we have at the Cardinal Nation, 20 years ago, 25 years? It's been a long time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the old the scout and fan home and all that. Yeah. Hadn't thought about those days for a while. So, but well, maybe that's a good, well, first I want to that was a transition point I'm going to ignore because I have another question. The old rule in show business is don't work with kids or animals. And yet now you're doing both on your podcast with Kyle and his dog.
Yeah.
How is that going for you?
Aggie the dog. Well, Kyle is extremely, we're talking about Kyle Reis, of course, and the Wednesday with Walton and Reis podcast we have at the Cardinal Nation. But Kyle is an extremely knowledgeable individual, extremely enthusiastic, so he can, back up his enthusiasm with good points that he sees about these players, watches video incessantly, and frankly is a good match for me. I'm more of an analyst type. I'm a reporter type, but I don't profess to be a scout. And I think Kyle could be a professional scout if he chose to be one. Of course, we all have real lives as well that we have to balance. But I think, and then from the personal side, of course, Kyle's audience tends a lot younger and a lot less formal. And it allows me to get to people who maybe hadn't seen me or heard from me before. And I think vice versa for Kyle. And so we're just starting now our second year. I think we're into maybe 13 months in, and it's gone exceptionally well, I think.
Yeah, it really seems to be. And I know just recently you've shifted the podcast onto, a little bit broader reach, Apple and all those kind of things. And I know I've been able to listen to it more, and it's been a really enjoyable and it's been really informative to listen to y'all talk about all these prospects.
It's funny. Sometimes I come into because I'm sort of the ringleader, so to speak, because otherwise if I let Kyle, lead the show, we'd spend an hour and a half and never get to the subjects. But seriously, sometimes I come in and I've got a list of like 10 or 12 things I want to talk about. I think there's no way we can do this in 30, 45 minutes. And then there are other times I come in with almost no list at all. and we ended up having some of the best podcasts ever. So it just goes to show you need to have some structure, but you can't have too much preparation, because then you're not gonna pay attention to where the discussion is going and be so focused on clicking off the next item that you leave good dialogue opportunity on the table.
Yeah, I've and most people will know I don't do that. We do. It is better for me to have a conversation and try to have some ideas of what we want to talk about. But I know as soon as I ask a question, you're going to say something that I hadn't thought about, and we're going to go down a rabbit hole, and that's going to be better than checking to a checklist.
Exactly. Agreed 100%. And, it's good for me too as well, because my business has been traditionally an online-based business. I hadn't done, way back, I don't know, it's probably 10 or 12 years ago, I thought about the idea of starting a podcast, and I didn't think I had the time. And it was about a matter of reallocating time and making time. And, in the off season, I spend a lot of time writing, but during the season, I spend more time editing and working with other writers, because we, of course, have young writers that are covering the various affiliates and all. So the off season is kind of more refreshing for me, because I can actually, do real work as opposed to just helping others, which is also a fun part of the job. But the podcast really doesn't take a ton of time, and it's allowed us to get to a lot more people than might stumble across the website.
Yeah. And 30 minutes goes in a snap when you get down and sit down and talking about baseball and things of that nature. It's, you look up and you're done. It's kind of crazy. So obviously this is huge. This era of Cardinal baseball is huge for you. Has there been a point of you've thought that this might not be great for Cardinal Nation, but it's great for thecardinalnation.com?
It's sort of been the opposite, Daniel. My business, and folks don't know, the Cardinal Nation has a mix of free and fee articles. People subscribe on an annual basis. Right now I'm looking the top 6 articles on the homepage. 3 are free and 3 are fee. And, folks will argue the good stuff's behind the closed door, but I don't always do it that way, because I want to make sure people understand what they get if they subscribe. But anyway, it's a matter of providing good content that people come and want to see. And, my goal is to provide new content 365 days a year about the Cardinals and the system. And sometimes that's hard, but it's not garbage. It's not stuff that we repurpose from somebody else and pick it up. It's stuff that myself or Kyle or one of the other very talented writers on our staff actually prepare. And so, it's tough, because there are a lot of people out there who are worried about how I'm going to pay my electric bill or how I'm going to buy groceries for my family. And spending, $79.95 on a website that focuses on the Cardinals minor league system is not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But I will tell you that we really, really work hard to differentiate our content and to give people value for their money. And I can count on a couple of fingers on one hand that a number of people who've come back to me and said, "Hey, I want my money back." And I advertise a 7-day, money back guarantee, no questions asked. But it doesn't happen. Once folks get in and see, if they're tuned into the Cardinals minor league system, they like what we have to provide. Now, let me answer the question that you really asked, and that is. My business tends to flow with the major league club, believe it or not. And so the last 3 years, as the major league club's fortunes have dropped, fewer people care about St. Louis Cardinals baseball. I mean, everybody still cares, but they're going to spend less time on it. They're going to think about do other things. And so my subscriber base, my clicks, my activity on my website, which, by the way, is ad-free. There are no pop-ups on the Cardinal Nation. There is no BS advertising, because it drives me nuts to go elsewhere. So you won't find it there. But anyway, my business dropped. And now this fall into this spring, with the Cardinals finally declaring, okay, we're going to go full in and rebuild through. And of course, you pick the word. It's not rebuild. It's retool. It's whatever garbage word you want to pick. But they're going to focus on player development. And it's going to take some time, and they made moves and brought in new exciting players. And so interest is up. And one evidence of that is we put out a prospect guide every year that hopefully folks know about. A lot of detail about the top 50 prospects in the system and history and all kinds of stuff that I'm sure we'll talk about later. But I order a number of books every year based on previous year's sales. Well, I sold out this year's quantity of books in the first month. And so I've had to reorder, which is something I haven't had to do in a long time. And this is the 9th year I've published the prospect guide. So I can see that fan interest is up. And that's a good thing for Cardinals baseball, because let's face it, these guys, whether we're talking about a J.J. Weatherhold, who's going to be up very quickly, or a Rainiel Rodriguez, who's still several years away, these are players that fans want to see when they get to the major leagues.
Yeah, and you were talking. We talked. You sent me your copy of the guide because I just ordered it, and you were out. I haven't gotten far enough to know if there's any hand notes in here that you need back or anything. But
and I didn't sign it either, Daniel. I'm sorry, but
this is true. It would have been nice to have an autographed copy, but some point in time we'll get together and we'll do that.
There
hopefully.
You go.
But it is. I mean, and I've only gotten. I really just scratched the surface of this thing, but it's incredible just to see even before you get into the prospects, that just keeping up with the history of this and getting a real, broad picture of, okay, this many people have dropped off our top 50, but this is comparable to the last couple of years. This is why they did this. It's not just a random thing. They got, they shipped off or somebody passed them or whatever the case may be. Just getting into some of that detail has been really incredible. And I know going in the future, continue to look at that is amazing.
And, I'm a spreadsheet guy, Dan. I have information. I started during the COVID year. I started a project which was to document the history of the Cardinals minor league system from 1963 on. And I have the data that I could do it. I got about halfway through the series, and then, normalcy returned, and I've never picked it up again. But suffice to say, I have a lot of information. So one section of the prospect guide is history, and it's the top prospect list back to 2009. It's awards of every kind of award that players have gotten over time. It is every player that's been taking the Rule 5 draft in the last 25 years, the international program in the last 20 years, the Cardinals drafts for the last 15 or so years. So there's lots of historical information. So you can pick up the prospect guide and say, okay, Tink Hence has been in the system 6 years. What are his prospect rankings? 11, 19, 3, 2, 3, now number 10. And so you can get that just at a moment's notice because I have the information, and so I choose to share it with folks.
And I think that helps when you're fighting off prospect fatigue a little bit. You talk about Tink Hence, and it feels that sometimes that we've been talking about Tink Hence forever and ever, and he's just never made it. But you can still see, one, how highly he's been ranked for so long, so he's still got that promise, and that he's still so young that it's not, it's not out of the realm of possibility. You don't really start writing him off just yet.
Well, and I just saw him throw a bullpen day before yesterday, and he looked great. His stuff looked dynamic. But, of course, we know the history of Tink Hence's injuries and lack of durability and lack of distance deep in the game, and he still wants to start. At some point, the Cardinals will probably give him a chance to start until he shows that he can't. But the question is going to be, will he ever have the durability to have a major league career? And the sad thing about it, of course, Tink Hence was drafted in that very talented 2020 class where there were 3 high schoolers taken early on by Cardinals, Jordan Walker, Mason Wynn, and Tink Hence. And the other 2 high schoolers have, been established in the major league for some time. Tink Hence has yet to throw a professional pitch at AAA. Yet to throw one pitch with the Memphis Redbirds.
Yeah, and as he's an Arkansas boy, I've been always trying to keep track of him, and it has been frustrating. We talk a lot about how the minor league system and the development system and everything has been changing, and I'm sure that we'll get into some more of that as you can talk about how things are different now. But one thing we don't hear a lot about is the medical side of things. Has there been some changes on that side as well?
If you were to, assuming you'll be down to Florida at some point, Daniel, the building that the Cardinals have created, the newest, biggest, fanciest building, is for the performance side of the house. Mm-hmm. And this is under Director Carl Koshin, who reports to the farm director, Rob Cerfolio. And I've just been able to look in the windows. They didn't allow us to tour in there because it's not finished yet, but there's equipment. There is it's an amazing facility. And before, it was cobbled together. They had a little room here. The minor league players had a strength and conditioning facility in a office park a block away where people had to walk outside the complex just to go do their lifting and that type of thing. So the Cardinals are investing both in people and in infrastructure, and it is very, very visible. I mean, and I quantified the numbers of how many staffers they've added, and it's not just directors and high-level guys. It's coordinators, it's teachers, it's trainers. Mr. DeWitt's given them the money to go out and hire the people, and now, of course, we're all anxious to see results.
Yeah, I think it's going to be very interesting to see how all this kind of comes about. And I was noting, and again, this is still taking root, so I understand. But I was just, again, first few pages of the prospect guide, how the lowest levels of the system last year were the ones that underproduced, and I think some of us would expect that to be the opposite if the new regime and the new procedures have, they would be implemented first, maybe at that level.
And one of the things that has not been publicized is that the Cardinals redid the entire Dominican complex as well. Mm-hmm. I didn't even know about this. I was talking, because I haven't been over there, I'm talking with the guys about all the money they put into the facilities there. Now, of course, the challenge in the Dominican Summer League is that you only have 35 players on the roster at a time, and you've got to keep them churning quickly because there's a lot of room. The Cardinals had 2 teams in the Dominican, and nothing would stop them from that other than money. They had 2 teams for a 3-year period, but then they stopped that, and that's something I think they'll look at. They may want to look at in the future to be competitive with other organizations. But in 2025, the Dominican Summer League Cardinals had a very, very good offense. I think their offense was like 5th in the 52-team Dominican Summer League, and that is very unusual for the Cardinals because the last couple of hitters we can think of coming out of the academy, Ivan Herrera, and before that, Oscar Taveras. There hasn't been a lot in a long time. So that's very, very encouraging. The U.S.-based Florida Complex League used to be a league where you would get some players from the draft and some international players. But number one, a lot of high schoolers aren't being picked anymore. The system has changed, and the timing of the draft and the focus of the draft is to encourage kids to basically go to college and not go into professional ball. Cardinals, I think, maybe only drafted one high school player the last couple of years. That's Ryan Mitchell, the outfielder who's in camp now. But so as a result, the Florida Complex League, the rookie ball, their team is primarily a feeder for the Dominican Summer League. The vast majority of the players, there's some rehabbers and some guys work, but most of them are international kids who have just come to the U.S. for the first time.
LifeLock, how can I help?
The IRS said I filed my return,
but I haven't.
1 in 4 tax-paying Americans has paid the price of identity fraud.
What do I do?
My refund, though.
I'm freaking out.
Don't worry, I can fix this.
LifeLock fixes identity theft guaranteed and gets your money back with up to $3 million in coverage.
I'm so relieved.
No problem. I'll be with you every step of the way.
1 in 4 was a fraud-paying American. Not anymore. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. Stop waiting around for the perfect candidate. Instead, use Indeed sponsored jobs to find the right people with the right skills fast. It's a simple way to make sure your listing is the first candidates see. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs have 4 times more applicants than non-sponsored jobs. So go build your dream team today with Indeed. Get a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
It's really interesting. And when you talk about, they used to have 2 teams. They might go back to that. It was a point that I thought about a little bit ago, and you can tell me how crazy it is. But has some of this drop off in development and everything like that, how much of it has been tied maybe to the fact that they lost 2 teams, Johnson City and I think State College, after the contraction of the minor leagues there around 2020, because it's around the same time when things started to tail off for the Cardinals, when the draft was shrunk and the teams were shrunk.
Well, I could back that point of view if the Cardinals had been different from everybody else. But the reality is that every organization gave up those same 2 levels.
Sure.
And so I think, to be honest with you, Daniel, I think in the later Musial years, the organization was trying to prolong major league success. We saw it in them going out and picking up Goldschmidt and picking up Arenado in signing Sonny Gray, in signing Wilson Contreras. They were trying to find a way, because they weren't developing these standout players in-house. How do they prolong the major league success? Well, some of the byproducts of that is they lost draft picks. And an article I've got ready to run this weekend, I went back. The Cardinals have 6 picks in the top 86 in the 2025 draft. I went back to look and see how often that's happened. In all the DeWitt years of the Cardinals ownership, this is only the 3rd time that they've had 6 picks in the top 86, because when they signed Contreras, when they signed Gray, they lost their second-round draft pick. So they lost not only the opportunity to get a difference-maker player, but they also lost couple million dollars in signing bonus power. They also lost $500,000 in international signing bonuses, which gave them less money. And that international is capped just like it is domestic. So the Cardinals hurt themselves. If you look, and if folks come and read this article, and again, it hasn't posted yet. By the way, when is this going to go live, Daniel? I should have asked you that.
Probably like an hour or two after we get it done recording it.
All right, well, look forward to this weekend. You'll see, but I've documented the Cardinals have given up 23% of their first 86 picks in the last 10 years, in the Randy Flores years. So 7 out of 31 top picks the Cardinals gave up. Sometimes it was free agent signings. They traded one back to signing Greg Holland, which was one of the worst debacles of the Mozeliak years. They lost a pick when they signed Dexter Fowler. And then, of course, they had those 2 draft picks that they lost because of the Chris Correa Houston hacking thing. So you lose 7 top players in your draft, and that's going to hurt your pipeline. Not to mention the fact that they kept cutting back on instructors. And I'm going to not get on my soapbox on this one, but I just got to make the point here. There's been a lot of announcement. The Cardinals are adding player development people, and they're creating these new positions, and they've added a lot of people. But a lot of these positions aren't new. They're positions that they used to have that they got rid of, and they didn't replace them. And so, we have a field coordinator for the first time. Well, they had a field coordinator for 20 years until 3 years ago, and then the position went away and they never filled it. So some of it, I guess what I'm trying to say is some of what they've done in player development is to get people back to where they were before. Now, they've gone very far beyond that as well. But I just want to bring up the point, and I'm not bashing on John Mozeliak, who, his resume speaks for itself. But in the later part of the Gary LaRocque years running the farm system, they were one of the lowest level staffed organizations. You couple that with fewer draft picks, and you can see what happens. It was early in 2024 when the Cardinals' entire starting rotation were players acquired from the outside. The entire starting rotation. Well, the Cardinals aren't the Dodgers. They can't afford to go out and buy the kind of players that that can provide a frontline playoff quality rotation.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And I remember when Katie, we wrote the article that there was like 5 people, 5 supervisors in the minors, and we were all kind of, well, not all because I know you knew it, but a lot of us were kind of taken aback at how far things had fallen for an organization that had made their bones. I mean, their history. I mean, if you go all the way back to Branch Rickey, has been draft develop, and to get so far away from that. And you're right. I think it was them trying to put a Band-Aid on the major league team, maybe to get one more run out of them for Mo or for Build a Bit or whatever the case may be, or just thinking they were that close. But it snowballed. I mean, lots of things kind of piled up on that, but they had a hole to dig out of, and it does sound, at least now, they're starting to fill it in.
Yeah, and folks you're going to have to be patient. I think most realistic people realize the Cardinals are going to be, closer to the bottom of the division than the top of the division this year. But they've got some exciting young players, and if we can see a few guys start to emerge, you can, begin to build some hope for the future. But, turning around player development, and granted, it was a huge Band-Aid to bring in the pitching that they did in the offseason. That's going to help them. But we also saw the Cardinals brought in a lot of pitching, back at the trade deadline in 2024. And most of those guys, Thomas Ajacey is about the only one from that whole, and he's not a pitcher. He's not even a pitcher. He's about the only, and Matt Swanson. I take that back.
Yeah.
But
that was a fluke
Swanson.
almost to some degree.
Yeah, that was a
somebody got hurt in Toronto.
We got to get rid of Paul DeJong, so what can we get for him?
Right.
But my point is, the big guys that they went after, Roby and the others, just haven't yet or aren't going to come to fruition. Sam Roberts is still in the organization at least, but Drew Rom's gone, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And they cut bait on like Adam Kloffenstein fairly quickly too. I mean, just for the fact that he was, there's this idea that they were going to go out and get these, restock the minor leagues. A couple of those guys, they just, and for whatever reasons, they cut bait on them fairly quickly and said that wasn't the way it was going to work.
Well, and unless we see Adam Kloffenstein, join a major league rotation somewhere else, that looks like a wise decision. But it goes back to the initial trade to say, is that the best you could do? But it's easy. It's easy to sit here and second guess. I think we all understand the challenges in developing pitching and the pitfalls that the approach right now is buy more lottery tickets, right? Maybe Jurangelo Sinja's going to make it. Maybe he's not. Maybe Brandon Clark will never be healthy, but you've got to buy more lottery tickets so you don't have a chance to win.
Yeah, I mean, if your success rate is going to be 1 in 10, then get 20 or 30 so that you can get 2 or 3 of those instead of 1 or less.
And top guys now, not just bodies. And nothing against the Adam Kloffensteins of the world, but I mean, he was never a top 100 prospect in baseball. He wasn't a guy that anybody ever said, hey, he's going to be a future top of the rotation guy at any time. But you look at a guy like Brandon Clark or Jurangelo Sinja, and those are guys that potentially, if everything falls right, have the capability to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's been very interesting as a Cardinal fan to go be on this side of the trades. Right, we're used to sending out the Sandy Alcantaras and the Zach Gallons, and then those kind of people to bring in talent to be on the receiving end of some top tier talent has been unique. But you're right.
And not a lot of fans are, some fans understand it. Some fans feel good about it because they're frustrated. Other fans are like, hey, you traded away all our stars. We've lost near-term hope. And one of those is Chaim Bloom's oldest son, who, I'd met his kids that are around the team here in spring training. And I asked Bloom at the beginning of spring training, hey, what did your sons think of the trades? And he says, they hated them. Because they want to see Nolan Arenado, right? They want to see Wilson Contreras. They don't want to see Joe Minor Leaguer, who they don't know.
Yeah, and it's and you're right. Patience is the thing because it still feels like for all the talk of depth, and there is quite a bit of it. There's still that what Derek Gould one time called a donut hole. It feels like the top layer, that AAA type. There's still not just that immediate, influx of if something goes wrong, these are the guys come in.
Well, that was the case last year as well. I mean, a year ago when we had this talk, I was probably saying, hey, Quinn Matthews is going to be the number 6 guy. And, when the starter goes down, Matthews is going to be ready to, be the guy to step in. And, Michael McGreevy's been around a long time, but, he doesn't have the same potential as Matthews. Well, things didn't work out that way, right? Matthews had some health problems and had a down year, and McGreevy came in and was exceptional. So you just never know with pitching what you're going to have. But you're right. You're on a good point, and that is the Double-A Springfield Cardinals had an exceptional year in 2025. No doubt about it. Won their division, both halves, blah, blah. And some of the guys are going to be ready to come up to AAA. But AAA, Ben Johnson, the manager at Memphis Redbirds, doesn't get enough credit. That AAA manager job is a tough job, because you never know what lineup and what guys you're going to have from day to day. Because when St. Louis calls, you lost your starting pitcher of the day, or you lost your cleanup hitter, or you lost your leadoff man. But Memphis Redbirds had a decent year, despite the fact that there weren't a lot of major league prospects burning up that roster. Now, when J.J. Weatherholt got up there in the second half, that they got a lot more exciting, and certainly Jimmy Crooks was there a lot of the year. But there just weren't the guys that were pounding, especially on the pitching side, pounding on the door saying, hey, I'm ready to join the Cardinals. And one of them, one of them I thought had some potential, Andre Granillo, was lights out in AAA, just lights out. But the Cardinals determined that they didn't think his fastball could ever be major league quality. And so we saw him, shipped off in a trade where everybody kind of scratched their head a little bit. But give the Cardinals credit; they're making decisions on guys, and until it blows up in their face, so far, those decisions haven't come back to bite them. Now, I don't want to go back to Randy Rose back that far, because obviously those decisions did bite him. But the last few years they've gotten a lot more at least in the end of the Musial years, a lot more cautious about making those kind of commitments or decommitments, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I think it was Jeff Jones had a tweet out today that, or maybe part of an article that, the Cardinals only made one move last year that required waivers or a 40-man move that they didn't have to make. And it really did feel like there was an overabundance of caution of, well, we might need that guy somewhere down the road, so let's, stick him in a closet or something of that nature, instead of, being aggressive and turning those spots, which is what we've seen. I know you and Kyle were talking about Ramos and, Kent and all that. Here Kent goes out and then he's back in, and in the middle, it's a guy that we thought had some potential, and he's there a week and gone.
Yeah, and I want to comment about that. I'm glad you brought that up, Daniel, because I don't know, I had a brain fart or something when we recorded our podcast, because I said, hey, I don't understand why they didn't take one of the injured guys, a Roby, and put him on the 60-day injured list and allow them to keep Brian Ramos. And the answer is, from a business perspective, you don't want to do that. You don't want to put a minor leaguer on the major league injured list because they get major league pay, they get major league service time, they get major league benefits. And a guy like Tekoa Roby, while he's on the 40-man roster, he had to be put on the 40-man roster to protect him from Rule 5. It's not like he's a St. Louis player yet. He's not. He's still got to prove himself at AAA once he gets healthy. So they didn't have the 60-day injured list option for Brian Ramos. But, they're thin at third base. Another thing Kyle and I discussed this week was, well, everybody's down on Nolan Gorman. He's had a lot of chances, and I believe all that. But there's nobody to replace him. Brian Ramos might have been the guy, but if he stays in the organization, if he clears waivers, he's going to be off the 40-man roster. So they'd have to re-add him. Right now, the depth appears to be that Jose Fermin is the backup third baseman, because at least so far in spring training, J.J. Weatherholt has not ventured more than a few feet away from second base.
Yeah, and I kind of thought that would be the case, although it could have easily gone, have him at third. And I guess it may. You want that cornerstone combo to be comfortable with each other, and I'm sure Wynn and Weatherholt are doing a lot to make sure that they know each other and how they're going to play. And
let's face it, they're more dynamic athletes than is Nolan Gorman. Nolan Gorman's claim to fame is, he can put the ball over the fence. And, that's not necessary. That's not, yes, that's true. But point being, I think you're right. The optimal defense is, assuming Mason Wynn is a set, no doubt about it, then, Weatherholt at second and Gorman at third is the right and the best decision. And the other backup, so it looks like Thomas Ajacey is kind of the middle infield reserve guy right now. The other thing, of course, we're waiting to see is, are they going to bring in a right-handed outfielder? And they probably still will once somebody gets put on waivers. So if I was Zach Kent, I wouldn't unpack my bags yet. Of course, Zach Kent's the guy that joined the team, left the team, came back again. But he's probably the last guy in the end of the roster. So they may still have an outfielder. But if not, then there's talk that both Fermin and Sajasi could see some time as a reserve outfielder as well.
Yeah, it really, of course there was articles about JC playing center or whatever. It almost feels like they're trying to recreate a Brendan Donovan type. They can occasionally play in the outfield, but will hopefully stay mainly in the infield.
As long as you have Nathan Church on the roster, you don't want JC in center field.
Yeah,
Nathan Church can back up Victor Scott just fine. And then I will tell you, you want to talk about a little bit about buzz in spring camp. There's one highly respected coach who I can't name, obviously, who said that he sees Brendan Donovan-like characteristics in Nathan Church. Unheralded guy, hard worker, gets a lot out of his talent, and has the capability to be something in the major leagues. Not necessarily just a hang-on fifth outfielder kind of guy.
That'll be interesting to see if that pans out, because it does feel like, that he is a great fourth outfielder right now, but he can, that center field, unless Victor Scott has his changes work, center field may be a lot of go catch it, but don't hit it.
Well, and the messaging from the Cardinals has been very clear all winter long. We got pummeled with it at winter's warmup, and that is, Victor Scott's our guy. He's working his butt off, and he has. I have seen Victor Scott take more bunts. He's bunting every day. I do not kid. Victor Scott is trying to become a more complete offensive player. Now, whether he can or not, I don't know, but they're certainly going to give him plenty of runway. And we'll see what happens in games, but I don't think Nathan Church is going to take away Scott's job. But it sounds like, especially with Lars Nootbaar, still on the shelf, that Nathan Church is kind of going to be the fourth outfielder for now, at least.
Yeah. It kind of feels that way. Again, we'll see what they do about getting people, that are not currently in the Cardinal Red on the roster. And then they're going to have to make some 40-man roster changes, right? They've got to put J.J. Weatherholt on there. It feels like there's been buzz around Packy Naughton. If he can make it, he has to be added to the 40-man.
I don't know. I'm not there yet. I mean, I've seen Packy throw bullpens. Let's see how he is in games. Certainly, there was a lot of buzz that Romero would get, Jojo Romero would get traded this offseason. That hasn't happened. It just depends on whether they like Justin Brule, who's a guy lefty they brought in. Of course, Nick Riquet is also on the roster. So I don't know. I wouldn't be penciling Packy onto the opening day roster yet, but certainly he's certainly an option.
Yeah. I mean, we have to give a shout out to Nick Riquet, who's still wearing number 70 as far as I know. So yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how this team looks, because it's really, the Cardinals are going to be pretty much a completely homegrown team, except for a few, scattered pitchers here and there, and see how they do.
So just to come back to your last point, because you may not know this, Daniel, but on the backfields in what they call minor league depth camp, which used to be called step camp, basically it's a parallel camp to the big league camp where they have about the same number, close to 70 minor leaguers in camp. And number 70 in the minor league depth camp is none other than Ty Pete.
There you go.
Who I am very impressed with physically, just looking at him. I thought as a center field, Ty Pete be a Victor Scott kind of guy. He's tall and rangy, moves extremely well. I haven't seen him play in a game yet. Obviously, I've seen him take batting practice, but Ty Pete has a look of a very solid athlete. And he came in, we ranked him just inside our top 20 on the Cardinal Nation's top 50. Of course, Ty Pete is a former shortstop, now center fielder, who the Cardinals got as part of the Brendan Donovan trade. So he can be your new number 70. Now, the problem is they don't have the numeric jerseys yet for the position players. So I'm having one heck of a time in the backfields trying to figure out who's who with no numbers on the minor league hitters' jerseys. But I'm hoping that's going to change very soon.
Yeah, they need to fix that, hopefully. Because, it's you can't tell the players how to scorecard. You can't tell them without the numbers on their back either. The name that came up a lot when Ty Pete was acquired was the idea that he could make a jump like Joshua Baez did last year. I mean, one, we don't know, obviously. I know you haven't seen him very much, but just on the face of it, is that reasonable?
I think so. The question is going to be, Ty Pete's history has been trouble with a breaking pitch and strike zone discipline. And those aren't athleticism questions. Those are questions that can be solved with more repetition and better skill building. And so the Cardinals had to look at Ty Pete and say, hey, we think, we can do what needs to be done to make this young man, more successful in all aspects of the game. But certainly the raw materials are there. But, that's the case in 99% of these guys. I mean, these are elite athletes. And it's just sometimes it's the mental side of the game, which you can have no way of telling, what's going on in a player's head and what's going on in their lives outside of the game, et cetera, et cetera. It's interesting. Joshua Baez, there's been a lot written about his breakout in 2025. And, I talked with his hitting coach who was coaching in Arizona this fall, and he firmly believed that the most important move that Joshua Baez made was in his mental game, in his preparation, in his confidence that he could handle Double-A pitching. Because, and when you think about it, it makes sense. Baez in 2024 fizzled out at high A Peoria, got sent down to low A, got sent to the backfields. I mean, his confidence had to be crushed. But yet, 12 months later, and he's a superstar at Double-A. And I didn't rank Joshua Baez as aggressively this year. I didn't put him in my top 10. I had him number 11 on my personal list because a little bit from Missouri on this one. I want to see Joshua Baez do it again at AAA. I've heard some people, and this is on the lunatic fringe in my opinion, but say, well, if Baez has a great spring, he could be that additional outfielder on the roster. And it's like, well, no, he really can't. I mean, when's the last time we saw a prospect outfielder skip over AAA, and we know what happened with Jordan Walker?
Yeah. That's
and by the way, Victor Scott did pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, which was. And it didn't make a lot of sense at the time either, because it was like they just didn't want Michael Ciani to play, and then they turned out that Michael Ciani could do everything Victor Scott could do at that point in time. Mm-hmm. But they, it does feel like lately they have really gotten enamored with spring training results and use those to make decisions that they probably shouldn't have, and hopefully that won't be the case with the new regime.
For the rest of my life, I will remember Shane Robinson, spring training, Grapefruit League batting champion.
Yeah. And that, he did actually get a chance to play in the majors, so there's that. But
no, Shane, and God bless him. Shane Robinson was, had a build like Stubby Clapp, and that he could build a major league career out of that. God bless him. But point being, the guy hits 462 in spring training doesn't mean a hill of beans come April 1st.
No, not at all, and we'll see how. Hopefully, if it is a mental situation with Baez, that's encouraging to think that he would be able to take that next and keep those gains even as he moves up. But again, we'll have to wait and see.
Kraft Mac and Cheese is better than 90s hip hop. We'll remind you of your childhood without making you feel incredibly old. Kraft Mac and Cheese, best thing ever.
It's funny, when I met Joshua Baez the first time on the backfields in August, the year he was drafted. What would that be, 2022, 2021? Anyway, and he told me in no uncertain terms, I'm going to be in the majors in 2 or 3 years. It's like, okay, yeah, you're on the backfields in the complex league. And, he had that confidence, but, his confidence got shattered and he had to rebuild it. And so, Baez is certainly one of the guys to watch, because as we talked about a little earlier, a few minutes earlier, Daniel, there isn't a lot of top talent, especially if Weatherholt makes a major league roster. There isn't a lot of top talent on the hitting side, pushing to get to St. Louis. I mean, you can look at Leonardo Bernal, who, by the way, was playing some first base the other day. It's not a position change, but if it looks like it's going to be, which is Herrera, Pages, and Pozo are on the major league roster, then you got Jimmy Crooks and Leonardo Bernal on the same team in Memphis. And where are you going to play him?
Right. Yeah, that's been something I've been thinking about, kind of all winter when they didn't make any moves with those guys, and especially when they brought Pozo back. It was like there's, you want Crooks and you want Bernal playing as much as possible, but if you're going to have them on the same roster, that's not possible. But you're right. If they can let somebody play a little first base here and there, that helps a lot.
And Pozo was backing up Burleson at first base the other day. Now, this is just, first week of spring training, but, it looks like Pozo is, potentially the reserve first baseman. They really like him. And I think when they brought him back and put him back on the 40-man roster, it kind of sent the signal, unfortunately, to poor Jimmy Crooks, you're going to need somebody to get injured to make this team.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Although I still think I remember Yadier Molina taking some ground balls at shortstop sometimes in minor league.
Yadier Molina loved to take ground balls at shortstop. I have pictures of him at Busch Stadium doing it. And by the way, Yadier Molina is in camp, and he is not a ceremonial visitor. I would say an Ozzie Smith, for example, is a ceremonial guy. He's not, he's not on the field, coaching. Yadier Molina is hands-on with the catchers especially. I'm very, very impressed with him, rolling up his sleeves and getting to work early on here. And I've been critical of Molina in the past because, I think his attention span tends to waver sometimes, and you don't know how long or if he's going to be committed to any kind of a job for a full season. But a special assistant job, gives him some flexibility to say, oh, Yadi, you want to go home and watch your son play baseball for a week or whatever, manage your basketball team that I know he doesn't own anymore, or his record label or whatever the heck he's doing. He can do that.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm sure that Yachty still has a significant passion for the catching position. So if he's working with catchers, that does seem to be a way for him to, tap into that. But he's also got to show, he's talked a number of times about wanting to be a manager. He's got to show he's willing to put in that work and stay focused. And, this is a good chance for him to at least start, maybe changing the perception around him if he wants to start looking for major league jobs somewhere.
Yeah. And I think the X's and O's part of the game, if we want to use a football analogy with baseball, there's nobody smarter than Yadier Molina. But the people side of the business is an important part of the managerial job, whether it's dealing with the players, which you could probably do, dealing with the media, dealing with fans. That's not Molina's forte. He doesn't like it. He never has. And I don't see Yadier Molina as the complete package as a major league manager. He'd be a wonderful coach, if he wanted to do it. But I'm not sure. And I know he's had success in winter ball and on all that, but that's a commitment of a couple months. It's not a commitment of like 12 months, which is what a major league manager's job is. I'm still skeptical about that.
Yeah, I've pushed on that as well. Him and Albert both. I mean, I know Albert's doing MLB Network and he's got a little bit more, personality perhaps for the cameras, but that's, doing things and talking and kind of, getting to talk about what you want to. When you're in the middle of September or August and the team's not doing well and the people ask why you didn't, bring in this kind of bullpen guy, I just don't know that either one of those guys wants to deal with that.
Well, that's a good question. I think Albert could do it, but there's a problem, Daniel, and it's called $1 million a year. And he's got 7 more years, I believe, on his personal services contract with the Angels. I learned, by the way, from Mr. DeWitt, and I don't think he said it off the record, but, that personal services contract that Artie Moreno offered to Albert with the Angels that caused him to basically swing over to them was something that DeWitt offered first. He offered that. He thought of the idea and offered it, and then the Angels matched it, and then gave him more years as well. But it's and then of course MLB banned that personal services contract, as well as giving a player a percentage of team ownership, which is another thing I think they were knocking around. But anyway, point being, okay, you're the San Diego Padres and you want to hire Albert Pujols to be your manager. The first thing you got to do is make it worth his while, which means it's $1 million just to pay off the Angels. $1 million a year for the next 7 years. Because otherwise, why would Albert do it? I mean, he's not going to work for free. He's not going to give up $1 million salary. So I think Pujols' own financial situation has gotten in the way of him. He might have gotten hired otherwise.
Yeah, that is an interesting point. I've wondered a little bit how that personal service contract would mesh with how he would be interviewing and stuff. So it's probably it never hurts for people to think you're a managerial candidate type of person when and not actually have to go through the rigors of interviewing and all that kind of stuff.
Well, and not having to go through the rigors of managing in the minor leagues, which is another question. I mean, we've seen a lot of guys based on, and start with Mike Matheny, right? Well liked, very very good at his job, but not necessarily equipped to handle all aspects of the major league manager role, no matter how good of a player, no matter how smart of a guy he was. And one of the areas that Mike Matheny struggled the most was the people side.
And it's Frank Robinson was a very good manager. I'm sure there's others off the top of my head, but it feels like so often that the superstars, Ted Williams didn't really make it as a manager. Some of those others just it doesn't work. I mean, and partly because they're dealing with players that are not as good as they were.
Yeah, Bob Gibson was a pitching coach for some time, and he talked about that. Hey, it's easier to be successful when you have the talent that a Bob Gibson has, but how do you go to a Zach Kent and try to teach him to be Bob Gibson? He can't be, right?
Yeah, and it's just do this like Stan Musial said, just hit the top third of the ball. Well, it's a lot easier for Stan to do that than anybody else.
Just hit the tar out of it, right?
Yeah. So again, a lot of things still way up in the air. We don't know where any player is going to necessarily land on the scale of things. But if you were to guess right now, what team in the minors do you think would be the most interesting team to watch this season?
Good question. I think Springfield looked like it was going to have a little bit of a gap in its rotation, but then they brought in Brandon Clark, but now he's injured, going to be out until June. I don't think Springfield is necessarily going to have the horsepower. I think AAA Memphis could have a very, very, very strong rotation, again, depending on health, but Quinn Matthews will be there. maybe one of the Boston guys if Dobbins and Fitz don't make the St. Louis roster. The offense is going to be better because Baez is going to move up, for example. And of course Bernal as well, along with Jimmy Crooks there for another year. So I think Memphis has a chance to be a very interesting team. There are just Kyle Reis and I on our podcast Wednesday with Walton and Reis devoted an entire episode to trying to figure out what the heck the starting pitching rotations are going to be in the minor league system, because there are so many candidates for so few jobs. We kind of came to the conclusion that at a lot of the levels, they're going to have to come up with some kind of a modified tandem or piggyback, and nobody's committed to this yet. But there's too many guys that they don't know enough about. How do we know if Blake Ieda is going to be a better prospect than Nate Dome versus Mason Molina? We don't know. Nobody knows enough about these guys yet to know, but yet they're all appear at this point in time to be starting quality. So it's going to be very interesting this year to sort out, who are going to be the guys that are going to be starting in the minors. And when I talked about Memphis, of course, I skipped over Tink Hence, who has every reason to, if he can be healthy. We don't think that probably Liam Doyle. We talked almost an hour and haven't even brought up Liam Doyle's name or Tanner Franklin, of course, the two pitchers that came from the University of Tennessee in the draft. But I don't think Doyle's going to be AAA. He might even be AA. There's a lot of talk that he'll start his career at AA. I'm not sure I would do that. I think I'd start him at Peoria, let him tear up the Midwest League for a month or so, and then bring him up. But 6 of one, half does the other. Liam Doyle is going to spend probably the majority of 2026 at AA, and the hope is that he'll do a J.J. Weatherholt in another year from the pitching side of the house.
Yeah. And I mean, it has not been unheard of for AA pitchers to make the jump all the way, although I wouldn't expect that out of him. And a lot of times that's relievers as well. I guess I continue to think about, Trevor Rosenthal doing that long time ago.
Trevor Rosenthal, was an interesting case because he never pitched in relief in a minor league game until he reached the majors. He was exclusively a starter his entire minor league career. They brought him to the majors and said, "Oh, by the way, you're a reliever now." And God bless him, he did great. But then you talk about pitchers who have great stuff, and Molina was involved in this decision apparently at the time. But when Jordan Hicks was coming off his high A year, and Jordan Hicks is throwing 103, I have a picture of my radar gun with Jordan Hicks throwing 100 plus miles an hour on the backfields, and everybody, the word buzzed around, and pretty soon there were like 100 people standing behind watching Jordan Hicks throw. But guess what? They rushed him to the majors. He didn't have a complete arsenal of pitches. He's bouncing around now. I saw the Red Sox trade him to the White Sox, I think it is, and he's just a guy, and it's a shame because he could have been a lot more, I think, if he hadn't been rushed.
Yeah, I mean, that's always been the idea. Would he have been turned into a starter, or then again, he could have easily gotten hurt like he did and had trouble coming back up. I wonder if you asked him if he would. Even though the way his career is gone, at least he's had a major league career. I don't know what he would rather do.
Yeah, good question. I mean, we can't change fate, but he has signed a couple of good sized contracts. So I'm not feeling sorry for his retirement fund. That's for sure.
No, I'd trade him. That's definitely true.
No kidding.
Definitely true. Okay, well, to wrap this up, I've been asking the same question of everybody, but I think it'd be interesting to hear your answer because you're going to come at it a little differently, I think. If there's one player you're watching this season, just continually to focus on, he's the main attraction, if you will, for you, whether it's from story purposes or playing purposes or whatever the case may be, who's that one player for you?
Well, it's low-hanging fruit for me to say this, but Liam Doyle's the guy. I mean, they bet a lot of money and a lot of focus on this young man. Very, very intense, not dominating physically, not a big, tall guy, a little bit, almost a little bit pudgy, but Liam Doyle is a bulldog on the mound, and we're going to find out if he can be the pitching version of J.J. Weatherholt. I'm very interested in Joshua Baez, even though, like I said before, I'm skeptical about him. If Joshua Baez can have a year in AAA like he did in AA last year, he might be the guy that, if Jordan Walker doesn't pan out, could be the right fielder for the St. Louis Cardinals for a long time. Rainiel Rodriguez, who I worried about when I saw him for the first time, 5'9", but the guy can hit the ball over the fence. And, he's going to be, in high A, but Rainiel Rodriguez is on almost every national top 100 prospect list now across the country. So this is a guy that, we have ranked third in the system right after Weatherholt and Doyle, ahead of Quinn Matthews, ahead of Bernal. So, those are the guys. You asked for one, but I gave you three names: Doyle, Rodriguez, and Joshua Baez.
Yeah, I think and Rodriguez is the guy that I'm really intrigued to see how he repeats, his success from last year. I have no reason to think he wouldn't. I just, we get so excited about some guys, especially low in the system, and then in a few years, it just never has clicked. So I'm hoping that this will continue.
Yeah, and again, scouts are very, very high on him. Mm-hmm. Very, very high. So it's not just scouting his stat line, but
right.
Again, we'll have to see. He hasn't played extensively at high A. Barely just got a touch of it at the end of last year, so there's a lot more time there. And then it's of course the raft of pitchers. We touched on a lot of the names, but then there's guys that are have been in the system too, who we're still watching. Ishan Henderson, who's had a little setback this spring. Chen Wei Lin, still physically very talented. Braden Davis had a great year. Bryson Mott's pitcher of the year. These guys are all top 20 prospects in the system. And Bryson Mott's especially, he's going to get a chance at Memphis. He should be a part of that Memphis Redbirds rotation. And we'll see if the progress the left-hander made last year can play, because he might leap over some of these other candidates and get in the St. Louis pecking order before the end of the year. Not a crazy thing now that he has a 40-man roster spot. And I'm talking about Bryson Mott.
Yeah. And I will say, I was looking at the guy just a little while ago, and I was surprised to see the guy that made the most starts last year through the minor leagues was Max Rajic, who was a name that we heard a lot a couple of years ago, and then it just kind of fizzled out. I just was surprised that he was still, he had pitched so well, so long to make all these starts, and we still didn't hear much about him.
Yeah, Max Rajic has been very durable. But is no longer a top 10 or 20 prospect system. He's in big league camp, and he put some weight on him. Max was a little bit bigger 2 years ago when he was the pitcher of the year in the system. But when he moved up to AAA last year, he got knocked around a little bit. He had taken off some weight in 2025. He's kind of put that weight back on, and we'll see if that helps his effectiveness or not. At this point, they're just throwing bullpens. I haven't even gotten my gun out. I haven't put the gun on anybody. It's not fair the first couple weeks of camp. But Max Rajic is certainly a guy that is kind of post-hype now, is almost forgotten about. And he's sort of like, he can either take the upturn or he can be this year's Ian Bedell, who is pretty much running out of prospect rope. He didn't get invited to big league camp even, which is unusual for a AAA starter.
So what does your week look like now? Does it change as games get started? I know you're on the backfields and stuff, so I wasn't sure if your approach really changed much when the game started.
Yeah, it's really interesting because in the month of January, they only had one field that was available to them in Jupiter because of all the construction. The construction is still going on. I mean, the first game is Saturday, and there's painters and hammering, and the gift shop, the clubhouse store still hasn't got anything in. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on there. But the good news is all the fields are available. And so now, they have like 140 players down there. And, of course, the major league team gets a priority. So when the major league team, wants to be on the field and have their bullpens, then the minor league guys are doing different things somewhere else. So, for example, today, the major leagues threw their pens at 10:15, 10:30. And then they came back at noon, and the minor league guys didn't start throwing their pens until 12:40, 12:45. So the minor leaguers kind of work their schedule around the major leaguers. Now, when the 1 o'clock game starts, come Saturday, the major leaguers will get their work in the morning, then they'll play their games. So the minor leaguers will probably, start their day noonish and do their work into the early to mid-afternoon. And I have to wait to get the schedule every day to find out exactly where they're going to be, because I end up catching a lot of the major leaguers just kind of by accident, by coincidence. But my main goal, of course, as you said, is I'm watching the minor leaguers on the backfields. So I'll see a few 1 o'clock games in the big stadium, but not a lot.
Yeah. Well, I hope.
And the minor, just one more point. The minor leaguers have their own game schedules, but the minor league games won't start until probably the second week of January or so. Right around when that spring breakout game is going to be, which is a real fun time where a group of Cardinals prospects will play a group of Nationals prospects. I think that's somewhere around the 19th.
And those games are a little chaotic, if I understand, because those are like, because we've heard about, a major leaguer coming over and leading off every inning so he can see pitches and stuff like that.
Well, that happens on the backfield. That definitely happens on the backfields, yeah. Yeah. That happens. But it's good. They're trying to get somebody extra bats or catch up. So that's a good thing. For example, just today, in the live bullpens, they had the sort of the second team, major league hitters, I would say, over there. So it was the Velasquez and Jordan and Mendoza, Antico, Brian Torres, but they also had J.J. Weatherholt there, and J.J. Weatherholt was stepping in the box against Andre Palante, and I'm sure what they want to do is make sure that Weatherholt sees as much live major league quality pitching as possible. Because there's no doubt he's ready, but they've got to make sure that he shows he's ready.
Yeah. I think that's an intriguing thing to keep an eye on. So, Brian, it's always been fun. Again, you're right. We should do it more often. And if you're not over at the Cardinal Nation, you should be. Like I said, even if you can't afford the 80, it's a lot of that stuff's free, and including like big stuff like your article on Brandon Clark this week. That was a free thing, even though it was a huge news.
Yeah, and I try to again show people the quality of writing that we do. Kyle Reis's prospect, write-ups are just exceptional, and that's a reason to buy the prospect guide. And by the way, the prospect guide doesn't cost $80. You can get an electronic version for $25.95, or if you subscribe, you can get it for half price. So if you're cool with a PDF version, you can get that relatively inexpensively. It's 275 pages of good information you just won't find anywhere else.
Yeah, and I usually am an electronic reader, but I had to get the spiral bound for this one because I feel like it may be really helpful this summer when we're watching games to have it available like that. So
yeah. Well, you got my copy, Daniel. So until the next shipment of books comes in from the printer, I am guideless, but you have one. That's how important you are.
I am extremely flattered, so I appreciate it. All right, well, next week we'll have Scott Plaza joining us from Redbirds Rundown and Cardinals on My Time. But until then, for Brian, I'm Daniel. Good night.
That's a flare toward right. It'll eat up with the sun. Baker, it'll get to the wall. Weatherholt's got good legs. We'll see what score they give, but it could be the first AAA hit for J.J. Weatherholt. His first AAA triple as well if it stands. That one's hit deep towards center field. That ball is gone. He has a triple and a homer in his Memphis debut.